Hey guys, welcome back to the Pursuing Excellence podcast. I'm your host, Jade, and I'm here today with Professor Michael Tannebaum. He is one of my college professors. He teaches interpersonal communication, one of my classes, and I'm glad to have him on the show today. Thank you for joining me, Professor.
Excited to talk.
Yes. So could you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind?
Yes, it's my third or fourth year here at Georgia State. I teach a variety of communication classes, like you said, interpersonal communication with you, health communication, communication law, basically a jack of all trades, if you will. But the reason you're in this class is my real interest, which is about relationships, right? So how do people form friendships, romantic relationships? How do you maintain relationships with your parents, with your siblings? What do you do when conflict arises? So that's a lot of what we talk about in this class and what my research focuses on.
Yeah, and it's so important, right? Because you have to be able to properly, know how to traverse through these relationships, and communication is so important. I think we kind of gloss over it, right? Something that we don't really think about, is subconscious, right?
And it's something that we don't really think you can learn, right? And think about how many math classes you've taken, science classes, history classes since you were like this tall, right?
Yeah.
And now, but you probably didn't take any classes on relationships, right? Like how to be, a good friend, how to approach romantic relationships, what to do, how do you deal with rejection, right? These aren't things that are taught, but they're things that can be learned and practiced, and that's why I like teaching this class so much. Because I think when we get that idea, when we introduce that idea to students, they're like, wow, I can learn how to be a better friend, a better romantic partner. I can learn, what a healthy relationship looks like, and so on and so forth, rather than, not to say there's some things you can only learn through experience, but I do think that there's other things that you can learn in a classroom.
Yeah, so speaking of that, what inspired you to get into teaching? Because,
So what inspired me to get into teaching? So, to be honest, I come from a family of teachers, but it wasn't something that I considered. My dad teaches, my brother, my uncle, they're all teachers. It wasn't something I considered until I was quote unquote working in the real world, and was like, you know what, I think teaching could offer me some things that I like. I missed the college environment, right? Like I look back on my time in school fondly, in college fondly, and I missed that atmosphere of being on a college campus. I missed interacting with younger people, but I also knew there was 0% chance I could ever teach anything below college, right? So like no interest in dealing with like high school students and their problems and issues and their parents. No interest in doing teacher-parent conferences.
Yeah.
But I wanted to sort of merge my interest in communication and relationships with introducing these ideas to students, and that's sort of what motivated me to get into teaching.
That's cool. It's not for everybody, but it is. He's like, yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, is this for me?
Still having second thoughts.
The pros far outweigh the cons for me.
Well, that's good. Like I said, this class has been very interesting to me this whole semester, because when I was registering last semester for the fall, I said, you know what, I needed an SCOM class.
Okay.
And I was like, you know what, this looks interesting. Interpersonal communication. This looks very intriguing. So I signed up for it, and here we are, almost to the end of the semester. And all of these things we've learned about, have been extremely helpful. So.
Yeah. I'm glad you got it. It's a great class, and it's one of those where if you were to take this class with someone else next semester, it wouldn't surprise me if you talked about not totally different topics, but largely different topics, right? Because there are certain things that we focused on. Mm-hmm. So I like to talk a lot about romantic relationships and dating and so on and so forth.
Right.
But you could have had, or the students who take this class with someone at a different time, they could talk much more about workplace relationships. They could talk much more about sibling relationships and some things that we do address in this class, but not to the extent of other topics. So again, I think a lot of the things we discuss, I feel like you can make them their own class, right? Like we could have an entire semester just on what it's like to be, a Gen Zer who's trying to date, right? Trying to date in the age of dating apps and societal pressures and all of the games and everything like that. I think this is something we could talk about for weeks on end. So there's a lot of content here potentially.
Oh my goodness, yes, it is so much. So speaking of this class, what did you say is your favorite thing that you have taught this class throughout this semester, or you just in general when you teach this class? Your favorite part?
That's a good question. I would say my favorite part has to do with how do we deal with rejection? And I think that it's interesting in part because there's so many like Hollywood movies and books that deal with like love and romance and show you like what a happy ending looks like, but there's a lot less that deal with, you know, what does a tough ending look like, what does a breakup look like, and we all have friendships that dissolve, we all have romantic relationships that dissolve, but these are things that again you learn the hard way oftentimes through experience. But I do think that there are certain things that you can do to sort of psychologically prepare yourself so that if this happens, you know how to cope in ways that are healthy, in ways that are productive, in ways that can make your future romantic relationships and friendships have a greater chance of being successful. So I think that's my favorite topic to talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind of a downer. My favorite topic is to talk about why people break up with you. So.
Right, it's like, no, but I think that's interesting. Like you said, media, mainstream media, it always shows you the happy ending, right? The Cinderella story, but it doesn't really show you like the, like you said, the bad side.
It doesn't show you like how do you get over breakups. It also doesn't show you like, and we don't talk about this as much as we potentially could, but again, there's a wealth of topics. It doesn't show you like how do you break up with someone, right? And that's something that we'll talk a little bit about here toward the end of the semester. But like how do you let someone down, right? And I think when we think about breaking up with people, it's not always because it was like a blowout fight or something that you're like, something like a clear, obvious reason. Sometimes it just doesn't click, and it's like, in today's age, everything from just like flat out ghosting someone to telling them the truth to sort of like, indirectly trying to break up with them. It's like, how do you end a relationship if you feel like it's not right for you? But you also, again, don't have like animosity or ill will toward the other person. I think is an interesting topic.
Yeah, it's definitely very intriguing because it's like sometimes like I say it just doesn't work, and you don't hate that person. It's not compatible.
Yep.
Sometimes it's not compatible.
Yeah. So how do you let someone down easy? So I know it's your podcast here, but if I wanted to turn the script, what have you enjoyed learning about?
Wow, that's I mean, so many things I've enjoyed. So I would have to say for me, just learning how to approach like romantic relationships, kind of like how to being able to know when I can know certain things, know when to probably should I approach that person? Is this the right time? Is this the right place? Right, and learning those key little tidbits that I think would be the most interesting thing to me I've learned this semester.
I love talking about that. Again, one of those things, right? Unfortunately, there's like no blueprint, which would make all of this so much easier, right? So if you could just look at like a checklist and be like, all right, it checks this box, doesn't check that box, so this means go approach, right? Or don't approach, or now's a good time, now's not a good time. But definitely involves more kind of subjectivity in decision making than that.
Yeah. And for me, like I would always say, it's just been kind of like picking up on energy. Like I'm a big energy person.
Yeah.
So like if I feel like if a person's energy, because you can tell when people want to talk or not. Right? That's pretty easy.
Yeah, and we've talked about that. Like everyone's busy, right? Everyone's got classes and jobs and families and just like other stuff, hobbies that they want to do. But like if you like someone romantically or even as friends, like you'll find a way to make time for them, right? And I think that is sort of foundational to a lot of this, right? So you'll find a way to answer a text message. You'll find a way to say, let's go grab coffee for an hour on the weekend, right? If you genuinely want to get to know someone or maintain a relationship that you have, like you'll make the time to do that, right? And I think that is, like you said, when someone gives you cues, I think that's sort of a cue to look for, right? Is this person, right? Are they making the effort? And if so, that's probably a good sign, right? Mm-hmm. If someone's always busy, never responding to text, always has something else to do, right? Probably an indirect way or not so subtle way of saying, hey, this might not be something that's going to play out.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to be able to notice those things.
Yeah.
But hey, it's better sooner than later, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I totally think. So, why do you believe that proper communication throughout relationships, is, whether it be romantic, friendships, is very important?
People can't read your minds, right? And I think it largely comes down to that. You need to be able to express your preferences, your desires, your concerns, when something isn't going well, and even when things are going well, right? I think we often talk about kind of communication difficulties or difficulties in relationships, and how do you bring up or address conflict. But I think one thing, and I probably overlook this to some extent in this class, is how important it is to let your partner and your friends know like things are awesome, right? And like hearing that reinforcement can be really valuable. And I don't think we always do that as explicitly, maybe as we probably should, right? And again, even when I teach this class, oftentimes it's about conflict, things not going well. I mean, today we're going to be talking about breakups, right? in a little bit, right? But it's like, I think communication is vital to not only address some of the difficult topics, difficult emotions that you feel, but to also, right, let someone know like how important they are to you in your life. And I don't know if we do that all that often.
Yeah, sometimes you never know. You can make someone's day just by telling them.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what I mean?
No, and we can't read minds, right? And I think we do to some extent. The longer you get to know someone, or the more you know someone, I think it's maybe easier to assume I know what this person's thinking, I know what this person's feeling, so on and so forth, and to maybe take that stuff for granted. But being able to, being able to like ask questions and remain inquisitive, and kind of acknowledge that there are things about your closest friends and your romantic partner of 5 years, 10 years, 20 years that you still don't know and are still learning. I think is really important.
Yeah, it is. And like you said, it's we gloss over it, right? It's not something. It's something we don't really think about, but it's important because a lot of problems could be prevented just by expressing.
Yep.
Just.
And it sounds so obvious on its face, but we don't always know when do we raise something that's a concern to us, right? Is it so minor that we hope it goes away? Is it something that we hope is a one-time thing? Do we hope, right? And we don't always know. And again, there's not a right time always in terms of like when you express a concern, when you raise a disagreement. And this is, I think, especially tricky when you're talking about like maintaining a relationship that's really important to you, or like early on, like in a blossoming relationship, right? So new boyfriend, new girlfriend that you're largely head over heels about, but maybe there's like a small red flag, something that you want to address, right? Like when is it appropriate to do so? Yeah,
and it's just always hard, right? You don't want to. It's crazy, man.
I wish I could lie to you and say it gets easier, but I'm not sure it does, right? So, in case my wife is watching, I love you. No, right? Like, no, I'm not sure it gets. I'm not sure it gets easier. Experience helps, of course, right? But yeah, like you said, it's there's no like rule book that says now's a good time to bring this up. Here's how you should bring it up. Here's where you should bring it up. Here are the words you should use, right? There's just no like rule book for all that stuff.
And if there was, like you said, it would be so much easier.
It would be easier, but at the same time, I think it would be more boring, right? Like, I don't think, and we sort of talk about this in my health communication class. One of the things we talk about is, right, we all have different kind of health life cycles in terms of feeling good, not feeling good, what's ailing us, so on and so forth. Some die young, some die old, some die in good health, bad health, so on and so forth. And that unpredictability, right, we sort of discussed, like, would you want to know what your life is going to look like health-wise, or do you sort of like the unpredictability? And I think that, and I sort of think about relationships the same way. I think that there's something to be said for like the uniqueness of each of them, right? Like, I don't know if I would want, if you told me every single person's going to live to exactly 100 years old to the day, have exactly the same health ailments, exactly the same good health, like I don't think there'd be any, right? So there'd be predictability, and maybe there's some value in that, but I don't really think that that's a life that most people would want, is to know that, right, what you're going to experience is exactly the same like every other person. So I think there's some value there.
Yeah, and predictability is, See, I'm a person I like to know things. You know what I mean? So that's like why, for example, if I was trying to pursue a romantic relationship with someone, I would probably want to, get to know them. Well, I want to get to know them, but just get to know a little bit more about them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So for example, if it's someone like in a class or something, like, maybe I'll just kind of listen and observe to things that they probably might say about themselves or things like that, right? Just, so I can.
No, there's value in that, right?
Yeah.
There's value in that, and there's value in like being in tune with like what your intentions and goals are for a romantic relationship, and seeing if they align with those of others, right? Because people look for, especially, I shouldn't say especially in college, but definitely in college, right? Like if you ask 10 college students, like what does your ideal romantic relationship look like right now? I mean, you could have 10 totally different trajectories, right? Ranging from, I want to be single, though I'm not looking to be in a relationship of any type, to maybe like on the other end of the spectrum, like I'm really into like casual relationships, I'm not trying to lock anything down, but I like having multiple partners concurrently, right? And you probably have everything in between. So I think, right, that's a tricky thing to navigate in college is, you might think I'm looking for a relationship, and like I know what I want, this person seems great, but if they want something totally different, that's going to potentially pose problems, right? So
yes, it will. So that leads me to my next question. What advice would you give to students now, college students now, about just romantic relationships, like just trying to, because this is a time right now, it's like we mentioned earlier, it's harder now, and you have the pressure of social media, you have many other factors. So what I know it's a lot of it's subjective, but what would you say generally?
So I'd say three things off the top of my head, and we'll sort of talk about this stuff a little bit later in the semester, but like always be honest and truthful with your intentions, right? Like when you're expressing romantic interest in someone, or conversely like rejecting someone, right? So I think be honest with what are you looking for in a relationship, what are you looking for in a boyfriend, girlfriend, or if you're not into someone, let them know, right? Let them know rather than lead them on, rather than give them false hope, so on and so forth. So honesty, right? I think a second one is just make sure everything's consensual, right? And I think that the importance of that can't be overstated when we're talking about young adults and romantic and sexual relationships. And then third, make sure things are safe, right? So if you think about hooking up, for example, there's been a lot of research on sort of the psychosocial and health effects of engaging in hookups. And it's generally thought that like if someone's engaging in hookups, there's not like long-term psychological consequences to it, right? So there's not, you don't suffer negatively. Research often suggests, but you can definitely suffer when we're talking about physical health consequences, right? So yeah, being honest, consensual, and like practicing safe sex, safe relationships, I think would be my main things. In terms of like, right, like those I think are critical to any type of relationship that you pursue. In terms of dating, right, if you want to sort of dial it back a notch, like you said, there's a lot of outside pressure, and I think college students put a lot of pressure on themselves. I would remind yourself, you're 18, 19, 20 years old, enjoy your time in school, focus on your classes, enjoy your friends, I know college students, to some extent you do have more free time than you've had, and I understand everyone's stressed with classes and work, but at the same time, right, you're not, you might have a little bit more wiggle room in terms of like how you spend your time, right? You're not in school all day from 9 to 5 like you were in high school or anything like that. So yeah, like enjoy yourself, and right, kind of, I guess I end it with like what you want in a relationship or don't want in a relationship could vary wildly, not just over the course of your 4 years in college, but even from like 1 week to the next. Yeah. So kind of being in tune with that and being open to that, and not putting pressure on yourself to find a boyfriend, find a girlfriend, whatever it is, but at the same time knowing that if you're interested in that, there's definitely avenues out there, whether you want to use dating apps, right, whether you want to join clubs, whether you want to go out with your friends, there's opportunities for that. So again, kind of embracing the fact that like some of the experiences that you're having at 18, 19, and 20 probably aren't going to be replicated a decade from
now. That's pretty good advice. You said keeping things consensual. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so keeping things consensual, basically making sure that anything that you want to do physically, that the other person's on board with it. So making sure that there is no ambiguity, no disagreement, no uncertainty about is the other person comfortable with this, right? And that you're not using like manipulative tactics, that you're not using threats, that you're not forcing yourself on someone, obviously, but just making sure that, again, like as a relationship progresses, romantically, sexually, and even otherwise, just that the things that you and your partner are doing, that you're both totally comfortable with everything, that you're both on board, that you've both had discussions about what you're comfortable doing, what you're not comfortable doing, and that's going to, of course, evolve at different stages of the relationship, and that, again, I think speaks to the importance of communication, but just making sure that you're both on the same pages with things.
Yeah, well,
That's what I would suggest.
Okay, yes, so you guys heard that. That's very good advice there by Dr. Tannebaum. That was pretty good. Anything that you had for me that you wanted to ask me?
Questions to ask you. So I guess I'll ask, so you've got this podcast. So what are your goals for the podcast, so going forward?
Well, I told you before, I am aspiring to be a sports broadcaster.
Okay.
So, but this is actually one of my 2 podcasts that I have. I do a football podcast also.
Okay.
And so I've been doing this like the last 2 years.
Okay.
And it's just, I don't know, it's also something to help me get into that field, a little backbone, but at the same time I like doing it. It's fun.
Okay.
And it's crazy, I never would have seen myself as a podcast. So I never would have, but one day I was like, hey, want to start a podcast? Yeah, give it a shot.
When can I get on the football podcast? I have so much to say about that. Is that we're just talking NFL football?
Yes. Hey, just let me know, man. We'll have you on.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I love football. So,
Okay.
yeah, but again, just, was there anything else that was?
No, this is great.
Okay.
No, again, this is good.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got to sit and talk about this stuff. Wishing you all the best in your classes with the podcast and everything like that. Hopefully on to great things shortly after you graduate here.
Yeah, so that's the plan. So
Awesome.
Thank you,
Yeah, this
Dr.
is great.
Tannebaum, for coming on the show.
This is great.
And thank you guys for listening, watching, however you are viewing this podcast. Make sure you guys subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we're also on every audio podcast platform. I'm Jaden, of course, Professor Tannebaum.
I'm Michael.
Michael. See, I don't like calling, it's a respect thing, so I'm going to call you Mike.
I get Professor, I get Michael. I let students do what they're comfortable with. Some
Okay,
never even bother to learn my first name or last name, so I'll just get like, hey.
Hey.
Hopefully by the end of the semester, most start giving me either a first name or a last name, but yeah.
Okay, good.
So.
Well, there you go. But thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you next time on the show.
Peace.